So we have two students who both start training Jiu-Jitsu on the exact same day, same academy, same instructor, same techniques, but somehow one student learns and improves at a little faster rate than the other.
Or a much faster rate.
Yes.
Possible.
How is that possible? They're learning the same techniques.
Eating the same food.
Everything's the same.
How is that possible? Same size, same strength, same previous experience, which is nothing, let's say. How do they grow at such a different rate? Any thoughts, you guys? The mindset. One of the students has adopted the right training mindset, the right learning mindset, the right philosophy. And it makes all the difference in the world. It's so incredible. It literally changes it. Like, for example, the path, just the simplest example, is from white to black belt can take
15 years,
20 years, or 7 years, 8 years, 10 years.
The example for me was that when I was a brown belt, my grandfather said 2 sentences. He said, Hito, this, that, and that. And those 2 sentences took me from a brown belt to a black belt in 3 weeks. Now, I didn't get my black belt in 3 weeks, but I literally jumped to where I was.
Your effectiveness went through the roof.
It's crazy.
Wow. Are you going to tell us those 2 sentences?
No.
But
that's not what matters right now.
He will.
I'll tell you eventually, yes.
Of course. Wow. So for Hidon, it was those 2 sentences from our grandfather at that certain point in his career that affected him deeply to cause that growth. For you guys, depending where you are in your careers, it might be something completely different. So we're going to give you all the Gracie philosophies, right? In order that we think is most logical. And it's your job to absorb them and hopefully let them penetrate, because, you know, you can hear us. The question is, do you really let it affect how you train, how you think, you know, during your training going forward? And if so, it'll have a huge difference. The first thing we need to talk about is we need to discuss what is considered by many to be the best thing about Gracie University, the Gracie Academy curriculum, and the way we teach. What's the best thing? What would you guys say? Number 1.
They think the details. They think the attention. They think the...
That's what most people say. Attention to detail. We break it down pretty deep. Sometimes a little too deep, but it's all good. Okay, we'd rather give you a little more detail than a little less.
Basically, we say everything that we know.
Yeah.
We don't hold back at all.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very in tune to what we're doing, so therefore we can explain every little movement.
Correct.
As instructors, we know.
And we're passionate. We really want you guys to understand what's going on. Like, we don't want you to watch something and say, wow, why did that do this? Or why did they do that? Or how did it work? And of course, we got that from our father. We don't take ownership or claim for any of these teaching abilities or detailed methods of presentation, because that's what our dad did. And of course, that's what our grandfather did as well. And it comes from the passion to help, the desire to help. And it's very sincere. Now, even though the details are the best thing about our teaching and our curriculum,
they're also the worst thing about Gracie University.
How is that possible?
The Gracie Academy.
How are the details the worst thing about what we have going here? Any thoughts?
You must know.
You guys, I want you guys to think about this. The details are so intensive, there's so much information packed in, that we believe, that you believe, we are giving you 100% of what you need to know to master the art. Do you think that?
I think they think that. Well, they don't think it anymore.
I mean, it just makes sense. Now, and the reason I'm saying that is because we have so many students here at the Academy that we can tell, and they have told us, to have that feeling. The feeling that, wow, it's so detailed that there's not even enough space for me to think. Just take it and run. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, you guys are giving it all to me. And you're thinking, well, how is that the worst thing? And the answer is because we can assure you that even though we're giving as much detail as we possibly can, we are only giving you half of what you need to make it to the top, or to make it to black belt, to make it to Jiu-Jitsu mastery. We're only giving you half. How do we know that? How do we know we're only giving you half? Well, put it this way. Let's say I learn a triangle choke, right? A setup, a triangle choke setup. If I get in a fight against 10 different people, I have little doubt that that triangle setup technique will be employed, will be used 10 different ways against those 10 people. I learn it one way, but I'll use 10 different kind of tweaks and variations of that technique in 10 different fights against 10 different people of 10 different shapes. So what this tells you is you learn a certain amount, but the rest is up to you, how you modify and adapt that technique or that jiu-jitsu to your own circumstances and needs, body types, and depending on your opponent, situations. How you modify that is up to you. So that's really, it's a very important thing to understand, is that we're going to give you half. So as you watch each lesson and you learn this stuff with the mindset that we're only giving you half, you will grow much more effectively than if you watch and think, okay, he's giving me this triangle. Thank you very much. That's all I need. And then you go try to use that in a fight, right? Or against a training partner, and things don't go down exactly according to plan. You don't panic and give up. You realize that it needs to be modified. It needs to be adapted. Our grandfather did it to the Japanese techniques to accommodate his frail physique. And now we're asking you to do the same for your own technique. We're going to share them with you to the best of our ability. We're going to share the most universal versions of the techniques. But you still need to adapt and modify it for yourself. So let's dig a little bit deeper in terms of where you get this rest 50%. Where you get the rest of the art beyond the details we share with them.
The overall principles of great Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
There's a principle of when you do the triangle choke. What's the principle?
Plug the arteries
with your leg and their arm.
Yep.
And the triangle choke involves your legs having a fully locked triangle. But it's possible that your legs are not fully triangled and the technique still works.
You guys have learned that. Partial lockup, right? Remember the partial? Partial, where your legs aren't fully?
Someone could think that the triangle has to be fully locked.
Right.
And then they could watch this right now and say, you know what? Let me try it with this guy who's a little bigger than me, and let me not fully lock my legs.
And see if it still works.
And then looking at the position, you see that the arm is in the same spot, your thigh is across their neck on the other side, and he's still tapped. So you're like, you know what?
Right.
I'm still clogging the arteries, and he's still tapped. So the technique still works with somebody bigger.
Wow. So what we're asking of you is to become a student of principles, not a student of techniques. Techniques are the window through which you are exposed to the principles. Wow.
Let's do some more.
More examples?
Punch block series.
Punch block series. What's the principle that governs the punch block series? And now, there can be more than one. There can be more than one principle at any given time, by the way. Distance control. One way to describe it. The other way to describe it is
maybe filling the space.
Yes. Someone pulls a punch, you got to put your hand in or your knee and fill that space. Now, that principle can be used from the bottom of the side mount, from the half guard, from the mount. Distance control is used all over the place. Standing, clinch. Wow. So once you understand the principle, that is, I guess, you're introduced to through those techniques, you can apply that principle in many different cases to meet your own needs in those specific situations. It's the understanding of those principles that allow me to decipher a situation that I end up in. Let's say you and I are sparring, me and Hidon. We end up in positions that are very awkward and weird and we've never ended up before. Every time I spar with him, I end up somewhere that I've never been before in my life. And how do I figure it out from there? I don't panic and say, wow, I've never been here. That is something that would happen to a student of techniques. But since I'm a student of principles, when I end up in a tricky situation, I think, wow, I've been somewhere similar before, and when I was in that similar position, I tipped Hidon off balance like this. Now, I'm in a completely different position here, but if I grab this and this, maybe I can get the same result. Because the balance, the principle of balance and balance control and leverage for a sweep is very similar for all sweeps, right? Control their base elements and then have a tipping force. That's what a sweep is. Control their base elements, so base control, and then have a pushing force, and over they go. Pretty much all sweeps are like that. So, become a student of principles, and then use your understanding of those principles in ways that we never discuss, and you'll be okay.
It's going to help them answer questions.
Yes.
Think
all
about
the what ifs.
Think about how many times people ask us a question like, you showed us the move like this, but what if you can't get your leg that far over their back?
It's so funny. Every time a question is asked like that, we know that student is a student of techniques.
Yes.
That is not a student of principles. The students of principles answer their own questions. They say, well, clearly, if I can get my leg over his back, I'll do this in the meantime, and I'll wait till the opportunity exists. But ultimately, what's the ultimate goal of the shrimp escape? Get him in your guard. So if your leg can't reach there, find another way to finagle your leg around and lock the person
And that
up.
goes back to the worst thing of the Gracie Academy and Gracie University, is that there's so much said in both lessons, whether it's here in our building or on Gracie University, that you don't stop to ask yourself, and you don't say, you know what, let me just get into the position and try it.
That's exactly right.
You have to just try it. You have to get there and say, what if I can't do this? Let me try this option. No, it didn't work. How about this? No. Yes. Okay, wow. This actually worked.
Right.
This got me the same final result as what Hidon and Henner showed me. But so therefore, I'm going to use it.
But it's a little bit different.
Cool.
Which is totally cool. Yeah, it's so major. And Hidon touched on it, but I want to kind of reiterate the idea of the details being the problem. The reason the details are the problem is there's so many of them. Let's say there's 25 details on a move. You're thinking, wow, I've got to absorb all 25 details. You don't even have time to think about anything but those details. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, I'm going to try these details. They try it the first time they're watching a lesson, right? They try the details, they go through it. They barely get it through one time. They watch the video again. They finally get all the details locked in. And then, okay, I got it. Let's move on to the next lesson. No, once you have the details, learning all the details and being able to successfully employ them in order is just like you built the window. Don't build the window and then run away. Build the window and then look through it to see if there's anything over there. So once you get the techniques lined up and the details of the technique lined up and you can execute them comfortably, that's when the true discovery begins. That's when you start asking yourself, well, what about this? Well, what about that? What if this? What if that? And then you start to discover, okay, what are the principles that govern this technique? And they're totally different from technique to technique. Now, there's only so many principles out there. There are only so many total principles. And that's what makes it interesting.
So, but the principles of that technique right there will be useful in another one in the future.
Because there are only so many principles.
Correct. So then therefore, when you think you got it, spend a little more time really getting it.
Really getting it, because the depth to which you understand that principle now will determine how effectively that deepened understanding serves you in future techniques, problems, or situations. The most important thing is that, like I said, you might learn the triangle choke, but when you get in a fight, things hardly ever go according to plan. Meaning, they don't happen exactly like we teach you in practice. Every person is different. Different size, different weight, different energy. So you better be very connected to the principles if you have any plans on prevailing in a street fight, because if you're not, and the technique goes slightly astray, right? It kind of messes up a little bit, or he does something different than you anticipate, you're going to say, oh man, the technique didn't work the way I hoped it would, and then panic attack, you know? So be a student of principles. Also, there's something to be said about learning between the lines. Learning between the lines. When we say, this is very important, this is another way to get that remaining 50%. We're only giving you half. The other half comes from principles, their unique application to you, and learning between the lines. When we say, when you're mounted, don't grab the wrist like this. Because if you grab the wrist if we say, don't grab the wrist like this, Because if you grab the wrist like this hand can slip out that way, right? Instead, grab the wrist like this, because he can't slip out. When we say that, what was just learned beyond what I said? Think about that. Well, for Hito, what did Hito learn in this party? That if he ever gets grabbed like this, slip his hand out. It's a possible escape from this grip is to go that way. So what we're asking is, when we present something, we might say these lines, and we're asking you to say, okay, if they said this and this, that technically you can infer that this is true. Right? I never said that Hito on the defensive side can slip his hand out as an effective counter. I just said don't grab it like this for this reason. So learning between the lines.
What's wild is the Americana arm lock. It's very common that people use this grip in catching the arm lock. And I almost once or twice a week escape someone's arm lock by just straightening my hand out.
Right, because you feel their hand.
Yes.
You feel it.
I'm very sensitive to feel when someone's holding wrong.
Now, how did Hito become so sensitive to that opening? Him doing the Americana correctly, he knows what it's supposed to feel like.
And doing it incorrectly. Maybe when I was younger.
Yes.
8 years old, doing it wrong, losing it. I'm like, wow. It's so difficult to hold it when I hold it wrong.
Wow. So do you see how many layers there are to learning each lesson? First, there's just get the steps as they're presented. Then there is learn between the lines. What other additional details can be derived from the lesson based on what wasn't said but was exposed? It can be exposed but not talked about. So we want you guys to take those as well. And then the third layer of learning would be, once you really understand the steps as they are and the learning between the lines, the hitting steps, then what? Start to discover the principles that govern that technique and understand that if things don't go according to plan, you can modify. You can modify and go ahead.
So every technique that's ever taught, like let's say a move that you're learning an arm lock for you today, you're practicing the arm lock or a sweep or whatever. Even though you might be training the technique on me, I am also learning from the bottom.
Oh, for sure.
Every technique is always going to benefit both people.
Yes, absolutely.
Every single one.
There's no exception.
Yes.
Because, even if you're cooperatively giving a situation, let's say you're giving the arm lock, what are you learning?
You're learning exactly where the arm has to be to be caught.
Which means you're also learning where it needs to be to not get caught. And that's the big part right there. In the arm lock.
Huge.
So, good guy or bad guy, whether you're given the opportunity, we learn so much from our students. It's so incredible.
We let a student mount us, and we expose our arm 100%. And then we do the next day, expose it 90%, 80%, 70%. And we find the point to where they cannot capitalize on the arm lock anymore.
Yes.
And then we know where we can rest comfortably because from there they can't catch it. And then when we go with each other, that might be enough for you. That 50%, you might make that work.
Right.
So then I have to go again and only give you 30%, and then you're stuck. And then I'm okay, cool. With Henner, I can only go this high on my elbow. Any higher, done.
Yeah. Major.
Scientists.
We're going to talk more about this when we discuss kind of sparring and how to basically take advantage of the losing opportunities and all of that. Now, this becoming a student of principles. Why didn't we talk so aggressively about that in Gracie Combatives?
Well, first of all, principles are in the techniques.
Oh, they're in there. Every technique, including the Gracie Combative techniques, have embedded principles that govern themselves and many other techniques.
But you don't want to give too much at once.
Yeah.
You got to learn the stuff first.
Because the Gracie Combatives course is your introduction to the art as a whole. This incredible art that the journey of 10, 15 years you're being introduced to. The first and foremost concern was to give you the steps and kind of the techniques. Of course, the most important street applicable techniques. But we wanted you to learn how to learn. Just to learn how to absorb just the steps. Because that alone can be overwhelming for a lot of students. If we would have had this talk coming into the course in front of Gracie Combatives, guess what a lot of people would have done? Turn off the TV, turn off the computer, and just went to go play basketball or ride a bike.
Back to our grandfather, our father, and us in the Gracie Academy is we really pride ourselves in giving just the right amount of knowledge at the right time. We don't want to stuff anybody with too much food. We give you a little bit, little bit. We just give it when you're
That's
ready.
a good analogy. Too much food is just as bad as not enough food. And discovery of principles, although you will begin to learn some principles naturally in Gracie Combatives, and you, as you did when you were in the course, we didn't want to overkill the idea because there was so much just to be introduced to the art and just to learn the basic techniques and to learn how to learn the steps. Because learning the steps is not easy either. Especially as detailed as this stuff is. Just learning the steps is not an easy task by any means. But now that you are a proficient learner, you can now learn how to learn on a different level, on a much deeper level, and that is learning the principles and becoming a student of principles. It's a major change, but one that has to take place because the techniques alone will not take you to the top. Okay, the techniques are just the windows for you to learn the principles that will allow you to fully understand the art. So let's be very clear. It's the most detailed learning out there, or at least a lot of people tell us that. And we're proud of that, but we are very concerned that it's too detailed and will cause you to not discover on your own. So, we're saying it now, that in order to get your black belt, you need to have 100% of your own Jiu-Jitsu. You need to have 100%. We're going to give you 50%. You need to have 100%. And where do you get the rest? Discovering principles, applying them in unique ways, and learning between the lines. But to get your black belt, we expect you to have it all.
To get your purple belt, 70%,
Of course.
85% brown belt,
Major.
100% black belt. And
Yeah.
you can go one step, no hurry.
And we'll see. In your various tests along the way, we'll be able to see at the stripe test and the belt test whether or not this learning, this principle learning mindset and becoming a student of principles is actually existing within you. And if it's not, we'll tell you. But our best advice early on: absorb it and become a student of principles, and your Jiu-Jitsu will be universal. Remain a student of techniques, and your Jiu-Jitsu will be very limited in its applicability and reliability on the streets, and that's what counts the most.